Good morning, everyone. Looks like we're about ready to get started. So I'm Claudia Cutter, and I serve as a marketing associate at EPE supporting the NERC team. Thank you for joining us for this webinar discussing preparing for cold weather events and NERC-related standards. We hope to share some helpful information with you, and we welcome questions and discussion. Please feel free to enter your questions or comments in the chat, and the panel will answer them at the end of the webinar. I also wanted to let you know that today's webinar will be recorded and we'll share it on our website, which is epeconsulting.com, and on social media in case you'd like to reference it later or share it with your colleagues. Now I'm pleased to introduce you to JC Culberson, our Director of NERC and Regulatory Compliance. And now I'll hand it off to JC.
Thank you very much, Claudia. And to everyone, just so you know, Claudia is going to help facilitate the Q&A if there are any in the chat. So just be mindful of that. If you have any questions, don't hesitate. So now, thank you everyone for joining our webinar. We really appreciate it. Again, we will record this session and share it to our website and to social media. So if you want, you can look us up on LinkedIn. If you haven't done so, you can please follow us there. In fact, I'll have the link to our LinkedIn site posted in the chat. And in addition, if you're interested in scheduling a consult about NERC compliance or anything related to cold weather preparations or NERC regional entities or any other compliance matters, feel free to reach out. I will also post that link in the chat as well. So I certainly appreciate it. I guess we can go ahead and get started on the webinar now. Give me just a second to share my screen here. And if you would just let me know, I think it's preparing the slides now. Great. Can everyone see that?
Yes.
Good. Outstanding. Thank you very much. Okay. So today we're going to talk, obviously, about EOP 12, the new extreme cold weather standard that NERC has been developing. It's been a very fast process to get this standard developed, reviewed through balloting and commenting, and it is enforceable on April 1st. So we're coming right up to the enforceable date. So obviously, everyone here should know that NERC and the Electric Reliability Organization, what that is the Compliance Enforcement Authority that FERC created, I guess, with NERC back a long time ago. To share a little personal story, a long time ago when I was in system operations. This was well before NERC had actually gotten any teeth. So back then the standards were guides, and it was really good practice, but there was no enforceability to it. That all changed, obviously, and so here we are today. So how do we get here for the cold weather standard? That's a good question, and I guess I can, from my own experience, I can say that the movement truly started in February of 2011, actually. At the time, I was a manager at ERCOT ISO, and I was called very early in the morning to come on over and get in the control room because we knew that we had some issues, and NERC, Texas RE, FERC, and the PUCT would be knocking on the door soon. And not to disappoint anyone, they did. So back then, NERC did a spot check. So we at ERCOT ISO had a spot check for this particular event, and some of the stuff that shook out from that was there had to be a new standard drafting team stood up at NERC to address operations during extreme cold weather events. I was appointed the chair of that project at NERC, and I can tell you over a few years it sort of died on the vine. There was a lot of talk of it being like a 100-year storm or something like that, and it probably wasn't practical to, spend a lot of money for a generator or a transmission element to weather a, once in a century type storm. Fast forward 10 years later to February of 2021, we found out that it indeed was not a 100-year storm, and this one in 21 was a fair amount more impactful. Um, so that's how we got here. NERC again was instructed to stand up a standard drafting team, and in not the same words, they were instructed by FERC that this was going to have to pass, and it couldn't just be squashed anymore. So that got us where we are today. In the new standard, there are some new defined terms. They will be used throughout the standard, and they're things that we haven't really, touched upon on the NERC world, or in the NERC world rather, prior to this. So the first one is generator cold weather critical component. That's basically any component or piece of equipment there at your site that can be impacted by extreme cold weather. And that would just be those elements that the geo owns. So the next one would be an extreme cold weather temperature. That's the temperature that you calculate over a period of time going back to January 1st of 2000. Basically, it's just the coldest temperature at which your facility has operated over the last 23 years. The last one we're going to touch on is the generator cold weather reliability event. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's an extreme cold weather event that impacts the reliability of the BES. And it's there are three different details under here. First one that would qualify as a generator cold weather reliability event. It's a forced derate of more than 10% of the total capacity of the unit, and exceeding 20 megawatts for longer than 4 hours. Startup failure or any failure to sync with the system due to the impacts of the cold weather event, or a forced outage due to the cold weather event. So with the standard, there is inclusion and exemption criteria. Another term that will be used throughout, which wasn't necessarily a defined term in the glossary of terms at NERC, is generating unit. Generating unit is just going to be substituted for facility. So the inclusion criteria is a facility or a generating unit on the BES, obligated to serve a BA load due to a tariff obligation, or an RTO ISO statewide, or any other regulatory requirement to do so. A contractual arrangement or anything else that you might have that means that you will be providing megawatts to someone else to use. And you have to be able to continuously run for 4 hours or more at freezing or below freezing. And the other inclusion criteria is a black start resource. To be exempted, you really basically have to get a waiver. So any BES generating facility or generating unit has a calculated extreme cold weather temperature exceeding 32 degrees would be one exemption criteria. And the other would be that if you're not committed to actually provide megawatts during that time. So here we have the requirements. We'll go through them to show you. So R1 is for what we'll call new generators, although they would be very new, and that's fine. But it's any generators that COD is after April 1st of 2023. Obviously, that would be post enforcement date of the standard. So for R2, we'll call this the requirement for quote unquote old generators. So that would be, although they're not really old, any generator that's COD happened prior to April 1st, 2023. Um, and we'll get into more of this. I'm not going to go through all of the requirements right now and read them all. There are a lot. It's 3 slides on the deck. So after this, I'm going to give you sort of a, it's the helpful hints and timelines is what I'm calling it for all of these different requirements and sub-requirements contained within the standard. So as you keep going down, you'll notice that the generator owner is on the hook for every one of these requirements. There is one minor exception, and that would be R5, where the GO and the GOP have to identify the entity that is responsible for training the operations and maintenance personnel, any staff there that's going to be tasked with implementing your cold weather preparedness plan. And so having said that, I'm going to jump over here to the helpful hints and timelines where I've really condensed the requirements down and given a quick sort of a synopsis of what the requirement is. So for R1, that's like I said, it's for the new generating unit. So there's no corrective action plan required for them. It's just this is a standard with which you have to comply based on that COD of April 1st, 23 or later. So R2 is you have to implement measures to ensure continued operations no less than 1 hour at your extreme cold weather temperature. Again, that is the temperature that has been calculated via the analysis that we talked about a little bit earlier over the last 23 years. So R3 is simply the requirements for your cold weather preparedness plan. So the first thing is you'll need the calculation date and source for all your temperature data that is used. You'll have to ID your generator cold weather critical components. So that's any part of the site that, if exposed to extreme freezing temperatures, would impact the output of the facility in a negative way. Next is documentation of freeze protection measures. So whatever you've done, if it's, heat tracing, putting up temporary barriers, just whatever it is, any temporary heaters, something like that, you'd have to have that listed out and documented. The next one is the annual inspection and maintenance of the freeze protection measures. So if you are using heat trace or temporary barriers or heaters or something of that nature, they have to be maintained as well to ensure that they will be functional when you need them. And generating unit cold weather data starts out with your capability and availability, fuel supply and inventory concerns, if applicable, fuel switching capabilities, if applicable, and any environmental constraints need to be addressed. And design temperature, historical operating temperature, or your current cold weather performance temperature, which is to be determined through engineering analysis. That will be your generating units minimum. So every 5 years, you have to calculate a new extreme cold weather temperature and update it as necessary. Update it, obviously, if it has changed. If it has not, then you just need to show that you've actually reviewed it. So review documentation of your minimum temperature contained within your cold weather preparedness plan. So again, piggybacking on our 4.1 there, just ensuring that any change that you've had makes it into the plan. And review whether your generating units have the freeze protection measures required to operate at the extreme cold weather temperature. If not, this is where the corrective action plan starts that we talked about in requirement 2. So you would have to develop a cap, and there will be some requirements for that as well. So requirement 5 basically boils down to the GO and GOP, as I said earlier, have to determine who will be training the maintenance operation personnel that is responsible for implementing the cold weather preparedness plan. And last slide here for this, R6, the generator owner that experiences a cold weather reliability event will develop your cap within 150 days or by July 1st, and that's the earlier date of those two. And it will include a summary of the identified causes, a review of basically an extent of conditions review of any other similar facilities that the GO owns to ensure that this problem is not systemic, and if it is, to initiate the corrective action plan there as well. And an identification of any temporary operating limits or impacts to the cold weather preparedness plan that would apply until execution of the correction action or corrective actions in the cap. So you have to identify any temporary fixes that you're using prior to the successful completion of the corrective action plan. So you have to determine and make known if your corrective action plan cannot be completed, and detail why. And you have to update your plan if any actions or timetables change. So it's going to be dynamic, and there are probably going to be changes. You just need to make sure those are documented for compliance sake. So that's basically the EOP 12 standard in a nutshell. Again, April 1st is the enforceability date. So it's coming right around the corner. And I can tell you for this presentation, I looked at the extreme cold weather preparedness standard, the red lines, the project page, and all of this, these links here will be provided to you all so that you can also go out and research this yourselves. So with that, that's pretty much it for the standard. I will open it up for any questions that you might have. Okay. So I guess one of the questions I had when I first started, attending the EOP 12 standard drafting team meetings was, how is this going to be different than the process that we underwent, back in 2011, 2012, and 2013, as a response to the February 2011 event, cold weather event. And there was a lot more support this time from NERC and FERC, as well as from the different operating companies. I think it sort of struck a nerve this time that this is not just an issue that happens once in a blue moon or once in every 100 years. So I think the writing was on the wall for everyone that this was going to be passed no matter what. So there was a lot more industry participation in this particular project. And I would love to answer any questions that you guys have. If you have any, you can provide them in the chat. Don't be shy. And if I don't know the answer, I will let you know that, and certainly find the answer for you. All right. Well, with that, I think I'm going to give back some time to everyone. Oh, wait a minute. Thanks, Rob. anytime.
All right. I just wanted to remind everybody that we will be sharing this session to our website and LinkedIn. And if you're interested in scheduling a consult about NERC compliance, please visit epeconsulting.com/contact.
I actually enjoy. It looks like someone might be typing in a question now. Good point, Hassan. So it is applicable to all generating unit types, whether it be battery storage or any other inverter-based resource, as well as conventional and thermal generation. So the measures to sort of weatherize a solar array is going to look completely different than the measures taken to weatherize a combined cycle plant or something of that nature. So one of the things that we've been doing, because the Public Utility Commission of Texas has required an emergency operations plan that includes an extensive weatherization plan on this, and we're marrying those statewide requirements to the NERC requirements right now in the plan that we develop. Yeah, exactly, Rob. Those are some very, very important measures, and at this point, based on some of the things that have happened recently, we're going to continue to see more and more focus on these weatherization measures. Indeed. Oh, great point, Rob, with the MREs. That's something that gets overlooked a lot. But if people are going to be day on, stay on at a place, they're going to need to eat, and one surefire way to take care of that is through MREs. If you've not been lucky enough, like I am, to consume these in the military, let me tell you, it's a treat. Thanks. Thank you. Waiting for another question here. I think one's being typed. Very good question, Hassan. So are you seeing these requirements get punted to O&Ms under their contracts, or does it require measures for the EPC prior to COD? Depending on the type of equipment and the type of measures being used, it could very well require something to be put in place during the EPC phase. If it's going to be barriers against wind and they're not temporary, they're set in place, then yes, obviously during the EPC phase, that would be something to be taken care of then. We are seeing a lot of this go to the O&M contracts. That's why in that requirement 5, it calls out whether the GO or the GOP will be responsible for training all the personnel, because in many cases, the asset management company under the O&M contract will be on site, but there may not be many people, if anyone, from the generator owner on site, day in, day out. So very good point. Yes, that could very well be the case that the O&M contract will cover the weatherization plan and implementation of it. Anytime. All right. Anyone else has a question, I'll be happy to answer it. Otherwise, I can give you back the remaining part of this meeting and the rest of your Thursday. And if at any time after this you determine that I should have asked that question, you're more than welcome to do so. You can email it to me, and I'll be happy to help. And I will include my email address in this chat so you all will have it. That's a very, very smart thing to do, Rob. Adding this weatherization training as part of your PR 006 training. That is a great way to kill two birds with one stone. That training already has to take place, and this is a great way to use up some of that training material. All right, everyone. I guess that is the end of my my webinar today. I appreciate all of you for showing up today. And if you have any questions in the future, feel free to reach out. My email address is right there. And we will be providing any support to you that you may need. I really appreciate it, everyone. I'm taking it back over to Claudia. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Just wanted to remind you, you can follow us on LinkedIn. We're going to put this session up on there and on our website. And you can always schedule a consult about NERC compliance with us at epeconsulting.com/contact. We really appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you'll join us for a future webinar. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.